Regardless how I feel about the 4th Great Shinobi World War, you probably feel as though more people should have been brought back to life. See, well, yes, a variable laundry list of characters from Naruto were brought back by either Kabuto or Orochimaru during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, and the defeat of all of those characters is what took up the majority of the first half of the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Whether it was Naruto battling against Obito's new 6 Paths of Pain, which were just the Jinchuriki, Kakashi battling it out with the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist, or Hanzo the Salamander and Mifune recreating their legendary battles, the idea that we needed more people resurrected during the 4th Great Shinobi World War might seem a little bit ridiculous. So maybe the answer isn't that we needed more people resurrected during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, but rather that we needed different people. Because while yes, it was cool seeing characters like Asuma, getting to see how far his team has come since his death, it was an awesome opportunity to get to meet all of the Jinchuriki who had died at the hands of the Akatsuki. If we're being real with ourselves, a couple of ninjas like Pachira, the Scorch Release user who were reincarnated, probably didn't need to be. And thus today, I want to go through a list of shinobi that I believe should have been reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Either A, because I believe their reincarnation would have been a great opportunity for us to get to know more about these characters, or B, because I believe these characters being brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War would make for some incredible plot lines. And thus today, I want to rank and explain all of the shinobi I believe should have been brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, from least interesting to most interesting. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me and Fiona here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, or just looking for a way to help me support these puppies in their growth to becoming even bigger menaces, apparently, you can find my Naruto reaction series using the 4th wall link in my description below. Fifi, what are we doing here? So, like I've already alluded to, the puppy of the day is Fiona. This is actually the only Pipple that is not adoptable because Fiona is going to Danny and Sarah. Little do they know that she's an absolute menace. Cute, but boy, oh boy, does she love to chew beards. Before we get into our list today, I want to talk about the metrics that I'm going to use to measure how interesting it would be if somebody were to have been brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. See, well, obviously, this list could be hundreds of shinobi long. I'm ranking these individual shinobi based off what I believe the plot repercussions of their reincarnation would accomplish. A good example of a shinobi who did not make this list is Kisame. Yes, I understand that there really isn't a way to reincarnate Kisame because he eats himself with his own summoning sharks, but Kabuto's pulled off weirder feats. Now, while it would be cool to see Kisame come back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War and maybe fight against Might Guy again, or maybe even fight against Rock Lee this time, plot-wise, that doesn't really accomplish anything. Like, yes, is more tailless tailed beast always cool? 100%. And it's like, hey, we're bringing back the other 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. Why wouldn't we bring back the most prolific 7 Swordsmen of the Mist, Kisame? But Kisame's story, by the time of his death, is just over. Maybe it would have been nice to see how he interacted with Itachi, and maybe he would have been able to break out of the control of Edo Tensei so that he could continue being loyal to the will of Itachi. But as far as plot lines go, I don't think that's a top 10 possibility. With that said, coming in at a number 10 spot, for most interesting people that could have been brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, we have Konan. Now, I know what some of you are saying. Nick, didn't you literally just say with Kisame that the idea of somebody being brought back just so that we could see their loyalties extend to the person that they loved the most in their lifetime wouldn't constitute a plot line interesting enough to generate a top 10 spot on this list? And like, yeah, I did. And I'd be lying to you if I said that one of the big reasons I want to see Konan reincarnated is so that I can see her interact with Nagato once again. However, there's a big difference between how Nagato and Konan went out versus how Kisame went out. See, Kisame went out still openly antagonistic to the hidden ninja villages. I mean, he died in a battle while actively trying to steal information about what Killer Bee and Naruto were doing. However, Konan died in a battle against Obito while trying to protect the corpse of Nagato and not allow Obito to steal his Rinnegan. And therefore, with a hypothetical Kisame reincarnation, we might get to see Kisame versus Might Guy, I think part 4. With a hypothetical Konan reincarnation, Konan would be put into a similar situation of Edo Tensei Nagato, where even though she died technically as a good person, she would be forced into doing the will of Obito, the person she died fighting against, which could lead to a lot of vindication for Konan in her afterlife. And while I understand that both Konan and Nagato kind of get their vindication before they even die, I think Konan possibly being reincarnated alongside Nagato could possibly lead to some interesting conversations around Nagato's Rinnegan in the afterlife. I mean, he's brought back with the Rinnegan. There is technically the possibility that Nagato could have used Rinne Rebirth to bring somebody or many people back to life after being brought back using Edo Tensei. Well, yes, it is loosely implied that you need some kind of life force to be able to use Rinne Rebirth, and therefore Nagato, as a zombie with a soul attached to it, wouldn't have the necessary life force to expend to use use Rinne Rebirth while he was in his Edo Tensei form, that's never explicitly stated. And therefore, watching Nagato try to grapple with the idea of maybe possibly bringing Konan back to life, I think would be a really cool plotline. But mostly it's because I believe Konan, who died in combat against Obito, being forced to do Obito's will, would also be an interesting plotline. But I'll admit, the reasoning for bringing Konan back to life during the 4th Great Shinobi World War is not that strong, which is why she's in the number 10 spot. But I'd like to think my number 9 entry is substantially stronger, because while the idea of bringing Konan back to life is actually probably an impossibility in the first place on account of the fact that nobody knows where Obito put her body, and therefore it's either in the convoy dimension or at the bottom of the gigantic ocean-splitting explosion that she used to try to kill Obito in the first place, our number 9 could and probably should have been brought back to life. Because coming up at number 9 on the list of people I believe should have been reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War is Kagami Uchiha. See, for those of you who don't know the name Kagami Uchiha was the grandfather of Shisui Uchiha, and not a whole lot is known about him. We know that he was alive around the time of the founding of Konoha, and therefore he was either not alive during the Warring States period or was one of the younger soldiers towards the end of the Warring States period. We also know that he was a member of Team Tobirama, in fact the only Uchiha who was a member of Team Tobirama, and thus as a member of Team Tobirama he was involved in the reconnaissance mission that Team Tobirama undertook in the Land of Lightning towards the end of the First Great Shinobi World War. The very same mission that Tobirama lost his life on when they were not only found out but also being actively pursued by Kinkaku and Ginkaku. But if we look around at all of the individuals that we know from Team Tobirama, like Hiruzen and Danzo, we understand that pretty much every single member of Team Tobirama was a Kage level threat. And this is why Tobirama offered up to his team for somebody to stay behind to battle against Kinkaku and Ginkaku and the 20 S-ranked ninjas that were pursuing them. See, because while Tobirama understood that he was always going to be the person who held the line so that those younger than him could make it back to the Land of Fire, he also understood that anybody who stood up and said, "I'll stay behind so all of you can make it home," would be a person who was deserving of becoming the Hokage. And therefore Tobirama most likely believed in Kagami Uchiha, as if he, instead of Hiruzen, stood up and said, "I'll hold them off so you all can make it back," he probably would have elected Kagami Uchiha as the 3rd Hokage. But Nick, that seems kind of like a baseless claim. We don't know how strong Kagami Uchiha was. Maybe he wasn't Kage level. And you're right, we don't. At least not fully. However, Shisui Uchiha, who was hailed as the strongest Uchiha of his time and the greatest Genjutsu user in the history of the Uchiha, openly admitted that he was inferior to his ancestor, and not only general power, but also Genjutsu prowess, implying loosely that the reason that Shisui Uchiha got something like the Kodowa Matsukame is because his ancestor, his grandfather in Kagami Uchiha, also had access to some kind of ridiculous Sharingan-based Genjutsu. Because as we've seen for people like Itachi and Sasuke and Sarada, Monkey Sharingan abilities appear to be bloodline genetic, as Itachi, Sasuke, and Sarada all have some variant of Amaterasu. And thus not only would it have been cool to see somebody like Tobirama interact with Kagami Uchiha, a former member of Team Tobirama, but it also would have been an incredible opportunity for us to see the strength of potentially one of the strongest Uchihas of all time, with the Genjutsu so powerful that he may have been able to not only break himself, but also others out of the control of Edo Tensei. Kind of like how Itachi used Kodowa Matsukame to break himself out. But I'll admit he's a relatively no-name character, which is why he's only at number 9 on this list. But speaking of no-name characters, the next character on our list literally has no name, because coming up at number 8 in the list of characters that I believe should have been reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War is the 3rd Kazekage. And yes, that's his name. The 3rd Kazekage, up until Gaara obviously hit the peak of his strength, was considered to be the strongest Kazekage in the history of the Sand. However, for some reason, he wasn't reanimated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, which is surprising because Rasa, who is probably one of the weaker Kazekages of all time, was reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Now, obviously, this is so we can have moments between Rasa and Gaara, where Gaara's battling against Rasa and Rasa's realizing how bad of a father he was. But we know that the 3rd Kazekage was a user of the Iron Sand technique, the strongest form of magnet release we've really ever seen. And yet, even though we know the 3rd Kazekage was a user of the Iron Sand technique, one of the strongest Kazekage ever, and previously reincarnated by Orochimaru in a filler episode, he wasn't brought back for some strange reason. And like, listen, I get it. This is Kabuto doing the reanimations, not Orochimaru. However, when Orochimaru did bring back the 3rd Kazekage in a filler episode to battle against Shisui's 3rd Kazekage puppet made from the 3rd Kazekage's body, Both Orochimaru and Kabuto were still working together, and therefore any cells or DNA that Orochimaru had access to bring the third Kazekage back using Edo Tensei, Kabuto should have also had access to. There was a canonical, at least within the confines of the anime, explanation to bring back the third Kazekage during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. On top of that, the third Kazekage was established as so ridiculously powerful that he was basically able to break himself out of Orochimaru's Edo Tensei, and while Orochimaru's Edo Tensei at that moment in time was deeply imperfect, still, basically everything about the third Kazekage was crazy hyped, and yet we still don't know his name. And therefore, in order to allow us to understand how strong one of the most powerful non-Hokage Kages of all time was, he really should have been brought back during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. But then again, there's plenty of characters more important than the third Kazekage who literally does not have a name, whose strength we don't fully understand. Like, for example, Shisui, who's coming in at number 7 on our list of characters that I believe should have been reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. By the way, Stank, for when you're watching this, the reason I keep saying that over and over and over again is because that's where I want you to start the clips for TikTok. Little peek behind the curtains, everybody. I mean, cut that out in the TikTok, but you can keep it in the YouTube because well, these people like me. See, if we're bringing back Kagami Uchiha because we believe it would be cool to see the full extent of his power, well then, that same exact lesson applies to his grandson, Shisui. And if we're being real with ourselves, even though Shisui said that Kagami Uchiha was far his superior, on account of the fact that Shisui is a much more important character than Kagami Uchiha, I would say the concept of Shisui being brought back is a lot more interesting than the concept of Kagami Uchiha being brought back to life. See, not only if Shisui was brought back during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War would we get to see the full extent of his power, kind of like how we did with Itachi, because while Itachi had been involved in many fights in not only the manga, but also the anime, pretty much the entirety of the time that we knew Itachi, he was hampered by his mysterious chakra disease. And therefore, while he was talked about as this ninja of legend who simply could not be defeated, in actuality, what we were seeing from Itachi was nowhere near his full strength, with him completing his battle against Sasuke and Orochimaru while on essentially his deathbed and nearly fully blind. However, when he was brought back using Edo Tensei by Kabuto and was able to snap himself out of the brainwashing using Kodo Matsukame, we, for the first time ever, got to see what an unhampered Itachi looked like. And it was wild. I mean, he was able to work with Killer Bee and a KCM1 Naruto to defeat Edo Nagato, and if we're being real, while both Killer Bee and KCM1 Naruto were there, it was Itachi who was the one stirring the drink that was Nagato's defeat. I mean, it was not only him who pointed out the fact that they need to throw all of their biggest moves at Nagato's gravity well to blow it up before it's able to Chubaku Tensei all of them into a big old meteor, but it was also Itachi who used the dust of that explosion to sneak up on Nagato and stab him with his Totsuka blade, sealing Nagato away. And after this ridiculously impressive feat of defeating Edo Nagato, we then saw Edo Itachi use his Susanoo in a battle against a Dragon Sage Kabuto, busting out a move that we had never seen before in Izunami and putting Kabuto into an infinite loop of accepting his fate. I'd like to believe that if Shisui was brought back, would get the same treatment. While yes, we have seen Shisui's Susanoo in non-canon episodes and also in non-canon video games like Storm 3 and Storm 4, I believe, but whenever we do actually get the opportunity to see Shisui's Susanoo and his full power in action, he is so much fun to watch. I mean, he's got this massive Susanoo spear, his Susanoo shoots Senbon, and all this is coming from a guy who was the youngest person ever to unlock his MS, unlocking it at the age of 7. Not to mention, if Shisui was brought back, he could use Kodo Matsukame to break himself and other people, possibly like Nagato, out of the brainwashing of Edo Tensei. And this is actually probably the reason that Shisui isn't brought back, because who's to say that the regeneration of Edo Tensei wouldn't allow for him to use Kodo Matsukame maybe several times, but even just the possibility of him being able to use it twice massively changes the outlook of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. But still, you can't say it wouldn't be cool to see him be reincarnated and get to know a little bit more about him. But speaking of characters that I would love to get more about, coming up at number 6 on our list in terms of characters that I would love to see reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we have Ashina Uzumaki.
Nick, Ashina who is that?
Well, just the last leader of the Uzumaki and supposedly one of the most powerful Uzumaki of all time. See, we know next to nothing about Ashina Uzumaki, outside of the fact that he was Mito Uzumaki's father, the leader of the Uzumaki, and so powerful that Hashirama realized that he should probably marry his daughter in order to solidify that everything was cool between Konoha and the Uzumaki. Now, with everything that we know about the Uzumaki, like the fact that they have adamantite chains, mind's eye of the Kagura, life forces so incredibly abundant that biting them is able to fill things like a strength of 100 sealed with chakra, it's safe to assume that the leader of the Uzumaki, who took them through the Warring States period, and presumably because they were said to be closely related to the Senju and therefore loyal to the Senju, which is why they bought into the foundation of Konoha, led the Uzumaki into many battles against the peak power of the Uchiha clan, and therefore was probably not only the strongest amongst the Uzumaki, but was also so powerful he was able to live to the age where his hair was going white through the most turbulent time in Naruto's history. And you know what they say, beware an old man in a young man's game. But at the end of the day, that's really all we know about Ashina Uzumaki. I mean, we do get to see Ashina Uzumaki in a little bit of combat in a filler episode where Ashina and Hashirama work together to seal away a giant, super powerful beast, which establishes that Ashina Uzumaki was considered basically the best Fuinjutsu in the entirety of the Naruto universe, which once again makes sense when you consider the fact that both Mito and Kushina and Karin all had access to the adamantite chains that they were not only able to use to suppress the entirety of the power of Kurama, but also Karin was able to use to destroy a giant wooden Bodhisattva being ridden by Obito. On top of this, the Uzumaki were responsible for the creation of the Reaper Death Seal and the 8 Trigram Seal, which was used to seal Kurama inside of Naruto, Kushina, and Mito Uzumaki. So to see Ashina Uzumaki, maybe one of the greatest Fuinjutsu users of all time, reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, where he could possibly try to use some Fuinjutsu against the Ten Tails, yeah, that would have been awesome. On top of this, as the pseudo third head of Konoha between Madara and Hashirama, it would have been cool to see how Ashina reacted in the situation of seeing Hashirama and Madara fight once again. But speaking of people for a possible hate for the Uchiha, coming up at number 5 on our list of characters that I would have loved to seen reincarnated during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, we have Danzo. Now listen, I get it. It was probably an impossibility to bring Danzo back to life on account of the fact that at the end of his fight against Sasuke and Obito, he literally uses some kind of crazy ink-based sealing jutsu to self-destruct himself. However, we're not talking about people who I believe could be brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. We're talking about people I would have liked to have seen brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. And Danzo is real high on that list. See, technically, if Danzo is one of the people reincarnated by Kabuto, he would be brought back as he died. Now, that doesn't mean that he'd be brought back with all his injuries, because obviously a lot of the people that were brought back using Edo Tensei died horrific deaths and were brought back with whole, complete bodies. However, it does stand to reason that if Danzo was brought back to life, he'd probably be brought back to life without any of his Sharingan, on account of the fact that he blinds each and every single one of his like 17 or so Sharingan using Izanagi in his battle against Sasuke, including the eye that he stole from Shisui, his Kodoa Matsukame eye. However, if you did hypothetically want to count the blinding of each and every single one of these Sharingan as damage that Danzo acquired in his final fight, and therefore damage that probably would be healed when he was brought back using Edo Tensei, I don't think that would be the craziest idea of all time. I mean, Nagato, who wasn't the rightful owner of the Rinnegan that he was given as a child, is brought back with his Rinnegan, even though Madara is also running around with a Rinnegan that he died with. The idea of Edo Tensei essentially copying Dojutsu isn't all that crazy. Now, obviously, Danzo wouldn't need these 17 Sharingan on account of the fact that he wouldn't need Izanagi because he's an Edo Tensei reincarnation and he can't die. However, if we did give Danzo the Dojutsu that he technically did die with, that would mean Danzo would also come back with, kind of like Shisui or kind of like Itachi, with a Kodoa Matsukame eye. A Kodoa Matsukame eye that obviously Danzo would love to be able to use on himself to break himself out of the brainwashing of Edo Tensei, but it's important to remember here that the only reason that Itachi was able to use Kodoa Matsukame on himself is because he programmed the eye in the crow that had Kodoa Matsukame to use Kodoa Matsukame on Itachi's eyes, because Itachi knew after his death, Sasuke would take his eyes. Technically using Kodoa Matsukame on yourself, or really anybody else, to break them out of the brainwashing of Edo Tensei and possibly fight for the side of the Shinobi Alliance would technically go against the directive of the Edo Tensei brainwashing. And while we've seen some powerful people like Hanzo the Salamander be able to resist the Edo Tensei brainwashing to a point where he was able to cut his own poison sac, which crippled him, allowing for Mifune to finish him off, I'm not quite sure Danzo would be able to pull off something like this. However, a Danzo with like 17 Sharingan, Kodoa Matsukame, infinitely refilling chakra, and infinite regeneration fighting for Kabuto against the Shinobi Alliance would be some sweet, sweet irony. See, not only would Danzo be forced to fight alongside people that he had manipulated his entire life, like Hanzo the Salamander and Nagato, but he would also be forced to battle against people like Hiruzen, and Hashirama, and Tobirama, and Minato, people who were brought back to defend Konoha, the nation that Danzo would be actively fighting against under the control of Kabuto. And thus this would be an incredible moment to reinforce the bad person that Danzo was. It would open the door for Hiruzen and Danzo to squash their forever beef, as the last thing that Danzo thought about was Hiruzen after all, and Danzo would present a literal, genuine threat to a lot of the most important members of the Shinobi Alliance on account of the fact that he could possibly be forced to use Kodomatsukame and one of the Shinobi Alliance's most important fighters, somebody like Naruto or Hashirama, which could sway the tide of the battle substantially. But mostly it would be nice to see Danzo see what he created, which was the advent of the Akatsuki as we knew them, the rise of Obito to become the leader of the Akatsuki, the unfolding of the Eye of the Moon plan, all things that he was responsible for. And thus Danzo being reincarnated to fight for the Eye of the Moon plan's completion would be like cosmic level karma, and I very much would like to see that cosmic level karma. But speaking of people who are seemingly cosmically punished, coming up at number 4 in the list of people that I would have loved to see reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we have Sakumo Hatake. Now we all understand that the reason that Sakumo Hatake was not reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War is because his soul technically is not in the Pure Lands. We learned that after Kakashi died in the Pain Arc that his father, Sakumo's soul, is actually in Limbo, and therefore Kakashi got to spend a little bit of time with him in Limbo before being resurrected by Nagato's Rini rebirth. However, technically after Sakumo and Kakashi's conversation in Limbo, Sakumo does move on to the Pure Lands. He goes on to see Kakashi's mother, who died when Kakashi was very young, so technically Sakumo could be reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. And while after the conversation that Kakashi and Sakumo have in Limbo, seeing Sakumo get reincarnated in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War probably would have been pretty brutal, I think I speak for literally every Naruto fan in existence when I say that I want to see the White Fang of the Leaf in action. I mean, Sakumo Hatake is talked about as one of the most powerful ninja in the history of the Leaf, which is a high honor. See, not only was he the leader of the offensive in the Third Great Shinobi World War into the Land of Wind that killed Sasori's parents, but he's also implied to have battled against Granny Chiyo and Hanzo the Salamander multiple times and survived all of those battles. And considering the fact that Hanzo the Salamander was able to battle against all 3 legendary Sannin simultaneously, it's safe to assume that Sakumo Hatake's power level was somewhere on the level of 3 non-prime legendary Sannin. In fact, that's stated. It is explicitly told to us that while all 3 legendary Sannin were still inside of Konoha, Sakumo Hatake was stronger than all 3 of them combined. And thus it kind of makes sense that why in the Third Great Shinobi World War there was Hidden Stone Ninja running away from Kakashi because they believed that he was Sakumo Hatake. Because while Minato is technically the only person to ever get a run-on-site order, Sakumo Hatake is a close, and I mean close second. I mean, when you have people running from you and you are clearly a child because you look like your father, I mean, that's aura. And that's why it would have been pretty dark to see Kakashi have to put down his father, who scarred Kakashi as a child by taking his own life. I think it would have been cool to see how Kakashi's power during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War matches up to that of his legendary father. It would have been a cool moment for Sakumo Hatake to see that Kakashi turned out just fine. And while, like we've already established, Sakumo kind of got to do that already by talking to Kakashi in Limbo, more than anything, I just want to see Sakumo in action against high-level opponents. I mean, hell, the idea of him fighting alongside Sasori is reason enough to reincarnate him. After all, he is the person who killed Sasori's parents and sent Sasori down the dark road of turning humans into puppets and therefore joining the Akatsuki. But since we're talking about legendary dead dads, let's get to our number 3 spot of characters that I would have loved to see reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. Because coming up at number 3, we have Fugaku Uchiha. Listen, I don't know what's worse technically, traumatizing your son by taking your own life in your house and then leaving your body for him to stumble upon, or planning a coup against a village that you know your son is loyal to more than he's loyal to your clan, forcing him to kill you in your home. I mean, neither are great parenting decisions, but that's what Sakumo and Fugaku did to their children. And if we're gonna be bringing back ridiculously powerful, bad, dead dads like Sakumo Hatake, then Fugaku deserves to be brought back as well. See, we know a little bit more about how strong Fugaku Uchiha was versus Sakumo Hatake, but not even really. See, we know that Fugaku, at least in the anime, was a dual MS wielder. We know he was known as Wicked Eye Fugaku and was one of Konoha's deadliest soldiers in the Third Great Shinobi World War. And we know that after the conclusion of the Third Great Shinobi World War, he was actually up for consideration to become the 4th Hokage. However, Minato getting the position over him was kind of the tipping point for Fugaku and the rest of the Uchiha to plan the coup against Konoha, because they believed that Fugaku was better suited for the role than Minato. And considering the fact that Minato only had the role for 2 years, maybe they were right. But yeah, in an era where Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Minato were all still around and loyal to Konoha, Fugaku was considered one of the strongest combatants that Konoha had access to. Somebody so powerful that it was believed he would be able to control Kurama, a level of genjutsu that we've only seen from people like Obito and Madara. But unfortunately, when it comes down to it, that's basically everything we know about Fugaku Uchiha. We've never seen him in combat. We don't know any important fights that he's been in. We just know what could have been if there was a little bit less Uchiha racism in Konoha. And thus I think it's relatively undeniable, especially on account of the fact that Itachi and Sasuke worked together during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, that it would have been awesome to see Fugaku involved in that equation somehow. Now, obviously, Fugaku probably couldn't be broken out of the brainwashing of Edo Tensei, and therefore he most likely would have found himself in a battle against Sasuke and Itachi. However, I think because the narrative surrounding Sasuke's childhood was the fact that he was always trying to outshine the impressive older brother that he had in Itachi, it would have been awesome to not only see the full scope of Fugaku's wicked eye powers, but also for Sasuke and Itachi to show Fugaku just how powerful they were able to become. Not to mention the fact that while they probably would have been forced to fight each other, they still be able to talk because Kabuto didn't erase the personalities of any of the people he brought back to life. And therefore, Fugaku, Sasuke, and Itachi could have talked about their views of how Konoha could possibly be changed. And Sasuke could finally get the approval from Fugaku that he's been looking for his entire life. Now that by the time that the Fourth Great Shinobi World War had come around, Sasuke understood why Itachi wiped out the Uchiha clan, I think a conversation with his own father about why he planned the coup in the first place, especially with the mentality that Sasuke had at that moment, which is that he needed to wipe out all of the friends in his life so that he could lead Konoha with an iron fist, would have been really, really cool to see. But since we're talking about reuniting lost Uchiha families, let's get to our number 2 spot, because coming up at number 2, for characters I would have loved to see reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we have Izuna Uchiha. Yes, I think one of the best characters that we possibly could have seen reincarnated during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War is none other than Madara's long-lost younger brother. See, Izuna Uchiha's death came at the end of the Warring States period, and while his death was the reason that Madara was able to achieve EMS, his death also crippled the Uchiha clan, because it was after the loss of Izuna that basically the entire Uchiha clan got together and said, okay, well, maybe we should listen to the Senju about this whole peace talk situation. But because of this, Izuna technically never got to see the foundation of Konoha. He never saw Madara shake Hashirama's hand. And while Madara obviously later turned against Konoha, believing that Konoha was purposely stifling the powers of the Uchiha clan to slowly but surely oppress them over the years, Izuna Uchiha would come out still hating the Senju, and still hating Tobirama, who Izuna would know killed him. And thus over the course of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we could not only see the rematch between Hashirama and Madara, which we did get to see, but also see the rematch between Tobirama and Izuna. See, because if we're being real, we don't really get all that much from Tobirama in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. Well, we get to see his mutual twin paper bomb exploding jutsu, which turns an Edo Tensei reincarnation into a million, if not infinite, paper bomb explosions, and we get to see him try to use Flying Raijin Slice against Madara. But unfortunately, when it boils down to it, that's really it. However, if we got a fleshing out of his powers in a battle against Izuna, I think that would have been awesome. Well, yes, Hashirama and Madara were the key players in the Warring State feud between the Senju and the Uchihas. It was Tobirama's killing of Izuna that basically brought the Warring States period to an end. And seeing Madara not only reunited with his long-lost brother, but also given his #1 combat partner back would have been awesome. Like, yes, I think it's probably cooler that Madara got to fight against the Shinobi Alliance by himself, but Madara and Obito hated each other, and therefore seeing somebody that genuinely had Madara's back would have been kind of cool. And we would have gotten to see a genuine high-level Sharingan user fighting at the fullest of their abilities. Not only is this a good way to put more respect on Izuna Uchiha's name, but also Tobirama's. And I believe it adds more depth to Madara's character. But even with all of those crazy pros, I still don't think Izuna Uchiha is able to take the #1 spot, because at the #1 spot for characters that I believe should have been brought back during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, we have Jiraiya. You saw it coming. Listen, I know that Jiraiya's body floated to the bottom of the ocean, and therefore Kabuto wasn't able to find any viable cells from Jiraiya in order to bring him back to life using Edo Tensei. I know the bullshit excuse Kishimoto gave us, even though Jiraiya very clearly lost an arm in the battle against the Six Paths of Pain, and either Kabuto or Obito, I don't remember which, openly admits the fact that they'd be able to get Jiraiya's blood off of the Six Paths of Pain's chakra rods and use that to bring Jiraiya back to life. Kishimoto has openly stated that the reason he didn't bring Jiraiya back to life during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War is that there was already too much going on, and adding in Naruto trying to grapple with the emotions of fighting his father figure who was brought back to life by Kabuto to kill him would have mucked up the storytelling of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, or something like that. Now, personally, I think that's insane on account of the fact that Kishimoto is literally openly acknowledging the fact that this would be a deeply emotional moment for Naruto, and Kishimoto fully understands that deeply emotional moments for Naruto are pretty much the best moments in Naruto, and went, yeah, I don't know, we gotta see Kakashi fight Zabuza again. But yeah, if we're being real, seeing Jiraiya brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War probably would have been the best part of the 4th Great Shinobi World War. See, not only is Jiraiya ridiculously powerful and therefore would have been a crazy foe for the Shinobi Alliance to try to take on, a fight that would mean a lot to a lot of people, like Minato, like Naruto, like Kakashi, who looked up to Jiraiya, and basically everybody in Konoha who was alive and around for part 1 of Naruto, like Tsunade and Orochimaru, because if you didn't know Jiraiya personally, you knew of Jiraiya. He's completed the most S-ranked missions in the history of Konoha. He was the only legendary Sannin with continued connections to Konoha, and his level of power was respected so widely that both Itachi and Kisame acknowledged the fact that if they fought against him simultaneously, everyone would probably die. So not only would it have been cool to see a Sage Mode Jiraiya battling it out with people like Minato or Naruto, but also, if we're being entirely real with ourselves, while Naruto is able to get his get back against Nagato, Naruto never really comes to grips with Jiraiya's death, and I believe being able to talk to him while battling against him and allowing for Jiraiya to see Naruto in something like his KCM-1 form or his Sage Mode form would be incredibly cathartic for Naruto. And as a lot of the 4th Great Shinobi World War is cathartic for Naruto, as Naruto gets to do things like talk to Minato, his father, allowing for Minato to see that Jiraiya raised his son in Minato's stead, at least a little bit later on, would have been an equally cathartic moment for Minato. On top of all this, Jiraiya hearing about Nagato's defeat at the hands of Naruto, seeing Nagato again as Nagato is also reincarnated, the conversations that they could have, there's basically infinite possibilities for incredible story writing that could happen if you bring Jiraiya back. And yet, for some relatively asinine reason, he is not. So yeah, if you gave me the option to bring one person back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, I'd choose Jiraiya. But I'm curious, who would you guys choose? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right, gingerbread man, let's say goodbye to the people up and out of the pocket. Bye-bye!